Welcome, my friends. Welcome to my world. I'm your host, Kevin Rutherford. It is Tuesday, May 3rd. That means it is time for another episode of the Power Hour. I've got the team with me from Pittsburgh Power. I believe today we've got Bruce and Pete and Leroy. So special surprise there. We'll get to your calls and questions in just a minute. Go ahead and line them up. Those phone lines are open right now. 855-950-3835. Calls are starting to come in, so jump in and pick up the phone and join us. I'm going to get to the team, Bruce and Pete and Leroy, here in just a minute, find out what's on their mind, and then we're going to go straight to your calls. So line them up. After the Power Hour today, I'm debuting another new show. I'm going to try to debut a new show every week if I can. Last week we did our first episode of After Hours with Kevin and Lauren. This week I'll be debuting The Pit, Politics in Trucking. So I'm going to try for the most part to keep politics out of my other shows, out of my opens. And once a week, I'll do a show where I'll recap what's going on. It's probably mostly politics. I'll probably throw some other topics in there, some of the things that I may normally do in an open. I'll save my commentary for that show. We will have phone lines. If you want to call in, you certainly can. The last time I did this show, The Pit, one of the reasons I quit was I just couldn't get anybody to really discuss or ask questions. If that's the case this time, that's fine. I'm just going to make it a monologue then. I may even look for a co-host for this show. Somebody who's, pretty into politics, maybe somebody with slightly different views. We'll see. If nothing else, though, like I say, I'll just make it a monologue and I'll just recap the kind of things that are going on each week in politics and a couple other areas as well. All right, we are going to get to the phones. We're going to hear from the team from Pittsburgh Power first. Line up your calls, 855-950-3835. And Bruce, it looks like you're first up on the board this week. Welcome back.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and welcome home. I understand your garden is planted, and so everything's getting back to normal.
Well, I wouldn't say the garden is planted yet, but I got in there and got some work done. And actually this year it was kind of exciting. I got to harvest things on the first day. We had asparagus that I planted last spring that came up this year for the first time to eat. And the cool thing about asparagus, I clipped it the other day and we had it for dinner, and now I can go out and do it again. It grows that fast, 24 to 48 hours depending on the weather. So we'll have asparagus every day for a couple weeks. And I left some potatoes in their containers all winter long, and they're some of the best potatoes we've ever had. So other than that, I have a lot of work to do, but it's good to be home, and it's good to get back to it. And the drive back in the coach was pretty pleasurable. It's a whole different coach these days.
Having that extra horsepower and torque's kind of nice.
I definitely won't let the crews drive it through the hills, and there's no need to. It'll go straight up and down just about every hill I found at 70 or 75 if you want to. It doesn't even downshift, but it also peaked out at about 58 pounds of boost.
Oh, that's high.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say, remember the 12.7 Detroit we built at the CMC? It's the first time you had it in Council Bluffs.
Yeah. Yep.
Mike Thompson, who's our catalyst dealer from Indianapolis, is in. He brings it back once a year for a yearly checkup. And there's a little over 1 million miles, I think, on it. He's averaging 8.7 to 9.1 mile per gallon.
Wow. That's awesome.
So it's doing a phenomenal job. And I'm saying this because there was a guy that said, I would never want an engine that was built in a convention center. So that's why I'm saying this, because when people come up with smart ass claims like that.
Well,
anyway,
well,
so there he is, 8.7 in the.
Yeah, let me comment on that because I was there watching it the whole time and it was pretty damn amazing. And that would be the engine I would want, not the other way around. Now, I've been in your shop. I've watched your guys do in-frames. They are immaculate when they work. You see the processes. Everything gets measured. I mean, they're serious about building the engine correctly. I've watched that in your shop, and it's clean, but it's not as clean as the carpeted floor on a convention center, or where that build was so completely spotless and clean. And the other thing is, it had hundreds of eyes on it. You know, if you're going to make a mistake, it's not going to be on that one. Everybody's watching. It was super clean. I'll take that one every time.
Okay. Well, we're ready to do another CMC. I know Pete's anxious. And I also wanted to say, I understand the government is thinking about the speed limit for semi-trucks. And, I've been spending a lot of time on the interstates, and it's so nice to just be able to not have to pass trucks. And I have a pet peeve of where two company trucks both govern, say, at 64 mile an hour, and one wants to pass the other, and for 10 miles they're side by side. And that's only going to happen more, and there's going to be more people doing leapfrog. You'll lose fuel mileage because you can't accelerate for the hills. So that is a bad idea, and if anybody from the government is listening, I hope they pay attention to that.
Yeah, I hope they do.
I also wanted to say...
Let me comment on that, because I think everybody knows I've driven slow most of my career. I promote driving slow. It's one of the best ways to get better fuel economy and lower your maintenance costs and all kinds of benefits to it, and it's less stressful. But having said all that, having done it for decades, I don't want the government doing that. That's not their role. If the speed limit is 80 miles an hour in Utah and somebody wants to drive 80 miles an hour, then they should be allowed. If you want to change the speed limit, then work on changing speed limits. Don't force us to put this kind of stuff on equipment. There are so many unintended consequences of this. You said they won't be able to, get enough speed on the downhill to get up the uphill. Oh, yes, they will. Watch them start putting it in neutral. And how dangerous is that?
Yeah, that's right. And if you recall, about 6 weeks ago, a gentleman called in from Nebraska and wanted us to make his new X15 be louder. And I had dinner with he and his son in Georgetown, Colorado, and we talked about that. He said it's just too quiet. So I got to do a remote tune on another X15 in the W9, a heavy haul truck in Denver, when I flew back from the Louisville Truck Show. And yes, we gave it more power, and everything is compliant. However, there's no noise. Back in the days of the big cams and the 4 1/4 B cats, and even the 6NZ and 5 EK cats, when you get and the 12.7s, when you gave them power and you laid into the throttle, you would hear the engine roar. These new engines don't do that, and it's kind of funny. Something to get used to. So I can see why when a guy goes from an older truck to a newer truck, he might not think it's pulling hard and running good, but I guess that quiet.
Think about it, Bruce. Almost everything we've gone through in trucks, we went through a decade or more earlier with cars. I mean, think about when you and I were building cars. It was headers and glass backs and cherry bombs. And, it was all about how it sounded, and they were loud. And that's just not the case with cars anymore. They produce all kinds of crazy horsepower and performance, and you can barely hear them.
Nothing worse than a Honda Civic with a loud muffler on it. Buzzing by.
Yeah, when they try to put the mufflers on those things, it just sounds awful. It sounds like a swarm of angry bees. But yeah, that was a big part of what we do when we built muscle cars. The exhaust system was a big part of it. Today, it's we don't do big block stuff. Now we get, a whole lot more horsepower out of much smaller engines, and they're quiet, and it's just a different world. Now we're seeing that same thing in trucks. You're right. These things are just really, really quiet, and they can still produce a lot of performance that way.
Correct. Okay.
All right. So
that's all I have.
It looks like Pete is up next. Pete, welcome back.
Hi, Kevin. How are you doing today?
Doing good. I'm back on the correct coast.
You enjoying the West Coast?
I am. It just feels different out here.
Good.
I'm glad to be home. Yeah, it was...
Good. Yeah, it's always nice to be home.
Yeah, like I said, it was an interesting drive. I was a little gun-shy after all the issues I've had on this trip, but one minor issue on the way home, I got caught in a really big rainstorm. I mean, it was just pouring. I think I was in Montana, and the wind was whipping like crazy, and it was about midnight, and I kept looking for a place to stop, and I couldn't find one. And a truck came by me, and a lot of times when a truck comes by, you get another big gust. And I got such a big gust, it pulled the windshield wipers away from the windshield and whipped them down so far that they stopped working in the middle of a rainstorm, the dark, looking for a place to park. So I finally got off, went to bed. I thought I'll deal with it in the morning. There's a rod down there with a ball joint that controls the whole thing, and it just came off. I mean, it was a 5-minute fix. Other than that, it performed flawlessly all the way home.
It's always good to have an uneventful trip.
Yeah, it sure was. And I pushed it pretty hard. I got here in just about 4 days, which is as fast as I normally want to do it.
How many miles is from here to your place?
2,600, I think. Sounds about right. And I was, doing the show, and when I leave and I'm on East Coast time, that show's 11 o'clock in the morning. I like to get up early and drive, so that's right smack in the middle of when I'm trying to get all my miles in. So that put me back a little bit. And then by the time I get out here, I can just get up, do the show, and then get on the road for the day. So I'm home for the summer. I don't plan on going anywhere for a while.
Good. So it's always nice to be home.
Yeah.
I know when I head to the shows, I look forward to going to the shows, but I certainly look forward to coming home as well.
Yeah. This trip, almost 2 months, that's enough for me.
A lot.
Yeah. So
I'm sure Lisa's happy to have you back.
Absolutely. Diesel too. So what's on your mind this week?
Oh, nothing new. Still staying busy. The shop's busy. It's backed up pretty far. So yeah, nothing new or terribly exciting to speak about today.
So one of the things I want to ask you, because we're just now starting to see it, I don't know what we'll do about it, probably nothing for a while, but in our business, we're starting to see the effects of inflation. Certainly in your personal life, you see it right away. Gas, food, every time you go to the store, things are going up. Business-wise, we've been pretty fortunate. We didn't have a lot of increases, but, I'm looking at our P&L this week, and I'm starting to see the cracks starting to show. Costs are going up. We're starting to feel it. We're in, pretty good shape right now. Are you guys starting to see that? Are you really starting to be impacted by some of those costs?
It is, yes. So, parts keep going up. Generally, so with Cummins, I see those prices, the price increase. I get the email, and generally first of the year they do it, which they did it this year. I got another notice that they're going to do another price increase in, I think, June, end of May or early June. CAT parts keep going up. Detroit parts keep going up every time we order them. So when we pull up a part, if you give me, hey, I need this injector, I can pull it. I can see what it is now, or like, hey, I got to order it and see what I paid for it the last time. And it's almost every time you order a part, the price is going up.
Oh yeah, that's not a good sign.
And freight is crazy expensive. I will do an order for something, and I realize if we're shipping to the middle of nowhere in Idaho, it's going to be expensive. It just is. But I was shipping stuff to Texas, and it was heavy, but nothing crazy. And I'm like, hey, can't be right. The freight figure, and it was just outrageous. Freight's getting terribly expensive.
Yeah, it really seems to, and it's such a weird time because the kind of freight, I think, we deal with that same kind of freight, which has to include what they call the final mile. We're not sending it to a distribution center or even a retail store or shop. You're sending to the end user, the customer. So you've got that final mile piece in there, whether it's FedEx or LTL freight, which is really expensive right now. Rates are coming down for the most part in trucking, except that segment. That segment of, I want it now, I need it tomorrow, I want it right to my house, whatever. That segment is getting, one, expensive, and the service is getting worse.
Yeah, everything's taking longer to get there.
Yeah. So
we're seeing that.
Hey, Bruce, I talked about a statistic that you might be interested in because you were around. Noel Perry, he's the analyst we work with as far as what's going on in trucking, and he's looking at everything that's happening right now: fuel prices, inflation, part shortages, labor shortages, what's going on with the rates. And he made a statement that we are looking at the worst conditions for trucking since 1980. And I said, well, then that's the worst conditions in trucking ever, because prior to 1980, that was a whole different industry. It was heavily regulated, the money part of it. At 1980, 81 is when we deregulated, and it's like a whole new industry, and it has been since 1980. But he's saying right now, what we're looking at, the worst conditions we've ever seen.
Well, I believe it.
Yeah. Our economy's a mess. That's going to be my show afterwards.
Gallon for fuel. Yeah. Well, our Supreme Court and FBI and CIA allowed them to steal the election, and I hope they're suffering too.
Well, we're that we had that big run up in diesel prices. Then they started dropping, so it looked like maybe that wasn't going to last. But we're setting records again. Just yesterday, we set a new record. I'm having a hard time keep $5.23 a gallon, maybe. The numbers are so big, I have a hard time remembering them because they don't make sense. That's a record high. It's never, ever been that high. And I was mentioning yesterday, I keep using that term. We're setting records, but none of them are good. They're all negative. We don't want to set these kind of records. So it's just going to be that much more important. The reason I bring this up on the show, it's going to be that much more important to really, really watch your cost. And when you own the equipment, fuel is obviously number one. We need to really be focused on bringing fuel costs down. Matt just sent me something. He said it's $5.50 a gallon. May have gone up again today. That's insane. I just, I've talked about prices like that before, but we've never seen them. I saw the chart for New England, $6.10 a gallon was the average in the New England states. The same thing on the West Coast. Over $6 as the average. That
and they vote for Biden. New England is a Biden fan, so there you go.
Yeah, the two coasts. So after the show today, I'm doing the pit where we'll get deeper into the politics of all this, but this really does impact all of us right now. These kinds of prices and shortages and everything we're dealing with has a huge impact on our business, but that's why we do this. I really, really believe, Bruce, you'll like this. I did an open last week, and I think one of the most important things people who own equipment right now could be looking at is how can they do more of their own maintenance or any of their own maintenance. Learn how to do it. Get some tools. I think it's going to become necessary.
Right. Now's the time to keep the max mileage in your engine, to keep the engine clean, to keep it running longer. If you don't have the sitting carbon in the combustion chamber, and you have the fleet air filter, so now you have the clean air, the engine may run indefinitely for you.
Yeah, I was experimenting with the Catalyst on the way back, and fuel economy right now for me was out the window. No point in even trying to track it. But I do have kind of an interesting result. So normally when I take a trip in the coach, it's 60 miles an hour just about everywhere I go. I very seldom pass anybody at that speed, so it's not like I need to speed up to get around people. So I'm pretty consistent at 60. And fuel economy is usually somewhere 5 to 5.5 at best without the trailer. That's been historically. On this trip, I ran minimum of 70 most of the way across the country. If speed limit slowed down, I'd slow down. But if it was 70, 75, or 80, I'd run at least 70, sometimes 73. I really kind of wanted to make some time getting back. And I was running the generator all night because it was cold everywhere I was and I had to keep the batteries up. The diesel fire heater was running, and they all three pull from the same tank. And I still managed to get 5.3. Which is about the same as what I always seem to get. But running that much harder, running the generator all that time, I have to believe if I were to go do a 60-mile-an-hour trip without the generator and the diesel-fired heater, I would guess I'm probably going to be well over 6, which I've never been. But what I was experimenting with the Catalyst, the first time I used it was on the trip heading east this time. And when I got to your shop, we noticed it much more because I was inside. The exhaust has a really odd smell. And we were all talking about it and commenting on it. And I got thinking, I wonder if that's because I've got the Catalyst in there. Then on this trip back, I was noticing a lot more white smoke at certain times, like going through parking lots. It's always hard because that exhaust is so far behind me. But it seems like, and I would skip tanks. I'd run the Catalyst in one tank. I wouldn't run it in the next. And I was fueling just about every day. It seems like when I run the Catalyst, I'm getting that smell and that smoke. And what I think that engine's probably pretty dirty. And I think the Catalyst is cleaning it out still.
The Acerts with their, what's the valve, Pete, on top?
Intake actuator.
The actuator actually opens up and lets exhaust back into the intake. So the actuator should be called an EGR valve, but they didn't do that. So you have these actuators opening and it's putting soot back into your intake. And if you were to look inside, you would see that's filthy in there. Now after this trip, it's going to clean it up considerably. And it'll eventually make it spotless inside.
Yeah.
Might take a couple more trips.
It seemed like that's what was going on. It seemed like it was just really dirty, and when I ran the Catalyst through, you could tell the difference. It was cleaning something up.
We noticed the same thing in the marine industry because a lot of the engines run at very low RPMs, and they have a lot of soot and carbon, and a lot of them are old, 15, 20, 25 years old. And they'll run and they'll clean up to a certain point, and then all of a sudden, one day, you'll have this haze coming out. And if you're cruising all day, it'll keep coming up. The very next day, it's all gone.
Yeah.
That was the final purge.
Got it. I kind of expect that's what's going to happen, but it's all good. All right, let's bring Leroy into the conversation. Leroy, welcome back.
Hey, Kevin. How's it going?
Good. It seems like I just saw you a week or so ago.
I know. I've been seeing you a lot lately. It's good to hear that the coach is running good, though.
It is. It's definitely a whole different animal now. Can't let it loose on the hills with the cruise control. Got to drive it now.
I was a little bummed I didn't get a ride, but
I
okay
know.
When you come back out.
That's right. I had so much fun there and I got so much done. I think that I should just because Louisville, I'm going to be there every year. So I should just make this an annual trip, go to the truck show and then head to your place for a week or two.
Yeah, you definitely should.
Yeah.
There's more things I wanted to do with your file anyway, the tune in your truck. So
good.
I just think it's a chance to get to it.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So what's new and exciting in your world? Anything going on you want to talk about?
I have a bit of a funny, interesting story with maybe a little bit of a moral at the end of it, something to keep in mind.
Good.
So we had a guy come in with a 60 series, a GDX5, and we just wrote him up the front counter. He says, I have a check engine light on. I don't know what it's for. Let's pull it in and take a look at it. So we pull it in, pull up the codes, and it says it's a oil temp sensor, right? The oil temp's too high. So we're looking at the value, and this thing has been pretty cold, like coolant temps like 120 degrees or something like that. Like the engine's not very warm.
Wow. Okay.
But the oil temp's reading like 230 or something like that.
Whoa.
Very wrong for an engine that's that cold. I'm like, okay, well, this seems like a pretty clear-cut case, so it's either ECM, wiring, or sensor. Because when you have an issue like that, it can really only be three things. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I crawled into the truck. It was a bit of a pain to get to. It's really buried in there. And I unplugged the sensor, and then we got a fault code for circuit open. Then I put a wire across it to short it, and we got a fault code for short circuit. So that proves that the wiring is good and that the ECM is good.
Okay.
So now we're just down to a bad sensor. So we go and get a new sensor off the shelf, put one in there, screw it in, and it reads like 120 degrees like it's supposed to, right? This is all not that interesting so far. And I go up to the front counter because he's ready to pay his bill, and he's just like, hey, I want to talk to you. I was like, okay. So I go up there, and we're talking. He's just like, I just had that sensor replaced 2 weeks ago. I'm like, no, you didn't. He's just like, yeah, I have the paperwork in the truck. I was like,
oh, boy.
No, you didn't. I was like, I was just under there.
Right.
It's covered in, like, crap everywhere. I was like, hasn't been replaced since 2005 when the engine was made.
Right. Yeah.
And he's just like, I'll take you out to the truck. We'll look at the paperwork. I was like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
And I went, and I have the dirty sensor in hand.
Yeah.
And from when I change it, and he goes out there and he looks at the paperwork, and he's just like, here. And the work order said that he took it to like a TA or something like that. I don't know. And the work order said replaced oil temp sensor. But the interesting thing was they put the part number on it, like of the sensor that they charged him for.
Oh.
He's just like, what is this? I was like, I don't know, Google it. I was like, I don't have my phone. Just type that number in on Google and type Detroit diesel. He types it in and it says oil pressure sensor. I was like, there you go. They didn't replace the oil temp sensor.
They replaced the pressure sensor. Ah.
I was like, well, they didn't, man. So I guess the moral of the story is like, if you have an issue and you get a sensor replaced, and then you go and you leave the shop and you still have the same issue, then you just look up if they gave you the part number that they replaced, just look up to see if they even replaced the right thing.
You know, I think there's another lesson in here, too. You said the first part wasn't interesting. I found it interesting just because I like the way you think through troubleshooting and how simple you made this. And I just don't see enough of that. And that these other shops, it's like they throw parts at things. They don't just stop and think it through. And the way you explained it was pretty clear. If you have this problem, what are the causes that could potentially be occurring? And you went through them. And, what's the easiest one to eliminate first? And that's what you did. And this is one of those cases that, even though for some people it might seem complicated, it's a sensor, it's electronic, you narrowed this one down pretty quickly. There are other things, we've talked about them in the past, like a fan not coming on right. There's like 17 things, it seems like, that can cause that. This one, though, you narrowed down. It can only be this. Like, and here's how, with one or two steps, we eliminated two of the three possibilities that quickly. And I don't think enough people realize how valuable those kind of skills are in a shop. That saves you, the truck owner, a lot of time and money when somebody does that correctly.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like some sort of like secret knowledge or something that I've obtained. It's if you're a new tech and you have no idea what you're doing. Like when I came here, like I knew about electronics. I worked on microwave boards that talk to the satellites and stuff. I didn't know anything about trucks, but when you look through the troubleshooting, it says you got this circuit error. It's like unplug it, short it, and then if those are both good, it's a bad sensor. So like that's just like the synopsis of a typical sensor issue. But it was just really surprising that somebody would look at a fault code and then not even know what sensor that they were putting on. Like, did they just get one off a shelf and just throw it somewhere? Did they not know what the oil temp sensor was or where it was? Like, it's very surprising that.
And there's another part of this that's kind of surprising. When your job is to fix something, and however he came to the conclusion that this was the sensor he was supposed to change, I'm not sure how they came to that point. But after you do, don't you go back to see if you fixed the problem?
Yeah, you would think so. There's a numerous amount of breakdowns here. Like, the parts guy ordered or got off the shelf an oil pressure sensor, handed to the guy. He says, I replaced the oil temp sensor, which wasn't even on the right side of the engine. He was on the completely wrong side, replaces it, and then, then they write in the work order, it's fixed. Like, I don't get it.
Right, it's not fixed. Nothing changed. You couldn't have even checked anything. No. That seems insane to me. It's like you pull in and your air conditioner isn't blowing cold, and they say, oh, look, we found this wire broken. Oh, okay, we fixed the wire. Hey, you know what? My air conditioner still doesn't work, though. Something's still wrong.
It still blows hot air. They're like, oh, I don't know.
But I fixed the wire. Yep, but you didn't fix the problem. Yeah, that's just scary and frustrating.
It was very frustrating because he I would see he was a little upset because he's just like, I think he immediately got a little offensive because he just had this issue fixed, and then I come along and I have it fixed in under an hour or whatever, or a little over an hour or something like that. And I was just like, it was pretty easy, clear-cut case. And I guess it wasn't.
Let's be real. You said you had to crawl under the truck. That sensor wasn't that easy to find. As a driver, even an owner, I'm on the road. I'm tired. I'm working hard. I need to be able to trust my shop. I don't think I should have to crawl under there to make sure you actually change the right part. So I understand why. You accept it. They say fixed, you get in your truck, you drive. But if it's not fixed, you really should just go right back.
Well, I'll give you one more point to this whole story. So he has a scan gauge, right? And that's how he noticed the issue, because he says, my oil temp still reads 200 all the time.
Okay.
And I was just like, it's broken. You should have turned around and went straight back.
Right. Yeah, the problem wasn't fixed. So a couple interesting things while I was there. I got to hang out with you. I got to learn a lot. Ethan and I hung out a couple nights and just got talking about different things. And, I'm looking at the coach itself saying, why didn't I do some of this stuff earlier? But I know why. It's just, for one, if I pay somebody else to do it, the cost is outrageous because everything takes forever. Being there for a week or two or back and forth, and I had time to do it myself and help and tools, really got a lot done. And I got looking at this and I'm thinking, I'll bet every coach on the road has just boost leaks everywhere. And nobody wants to fix them because it's too much work. But I was talking to Ethan, and he was telling me he had a phone call from a guy with a Prevost. And I forget what engine it had in it now. It might have been... Oh, now I can't remember what engine. He would know. But the lesson is the same anyway. He said that the shop was telling him that it was due for an overhead. It had like 80,000 miles maybe or less. And the shop was telling him it was due for an overhead. He really needed to get it done. It was important. And the cost was only $7,000.
Only, yeah.
They basically have to take the engine out of the cradle to do an overhead on this thing. So it was going to be $7,000. And I said, that engine would never get an overhead if that was mine. Here's the thing. How many trucks pull into shops, commercial Class A trucks, pull into shops day after day after day? Nobody ever bothers to tell them they probably should do an overhead on those. And yet, we've got this shop wanting you to spend $7,000 to go in and do it.
Oh yeah, I think there's a premium on coaches too.
Oh, well, if the labor is you have to get the engine out of the cradle to do this, that's a pretty big premium.
Well, yeah, that and just parts in general, yeah.
Right, yeah, and And there are probably less technicians to work on those, so it's a supply and demand thing. So the labor rate, the shop rate's usually higher. Everything takes longer. But I thought that was just incredible, $7,000 to do an overhead. Oh, man.
And I think coaches are there's like two types of coaches with all the ones I've seen. They're either the ones that get babied and they're like mint, or there's a complete other side of the spectrum is they're the most abused, heavy duty engine on the road.
You saw mine. Yeah, that's mine. Mine actually gets used. I mean, mine's like a work truck almost. It's not, it's not
abused, not used, abused.
Oh, yeah. Well, that too. Yeah. And some
the
of
last
the
Prevost I saw in here.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say the last Prevost I had in here, the guy was driving it, and the engine goes. This one had EGR, and it goes through an EGR cooler, which cools the exhaust gas before it goes into the intake, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to breathe 1,000 degrees of exhaust gas. This one came in with like 255 counts of EGR temp high, and the highest one was like 1,027 degrees.
Wow.
That is like 1,000, almost, by the time it mixes with the intake, that's 200-300 degrees of intake air temp.
That's hot.
And the guy's just like, yeah, I just hold it on the floor at all times. And it's like, you're going to blow,
Yeah. And he holds it on.
That's what I see. They're either just abused or not.
Yeah, he holds it on the floor because he's got nothing but boost leaks everywhere. I'm familiar with that.
Yeah,
so,
that's what I mean.
That's what it
They're
takes
awful.
to drive it. Yeah. All right, we're going to get to some calls. Let's get started today in Texas. Greg, welcome to the program. Oh, Greg, are you there? Sounds like somebody might be there now. Greg? Let me put him back in the queue, and we'll try somebody else. Maybe I should refresh just to see what I've got going on here. Let's try this line. Let's go to Illinois. Derek, welcome to the program.
Hey, Kevin. Hey, guys. I was actually the first caller last week on the Power Hour. You might remember I was able to get my OPS installed. Thank you to Pete. And thank you to his suggestion of getting a hold of Brian in the shop there. He got me sorted out and was able to get the OPS installed yesterday. So that kind of brings me to my next little problem here. I'm not certain what thermostat this truck's got in it. If you might remember, I had an in-frame done back in October, actually called October through January. And the truck will run about 100 to 175 degrees on the water temperature. But last night, for anybody that's traveling out here in the Midwest, the wind's blowing super hard. It's been raining. For some reason, I was driving straight in that wind, and I was lucky to have this thing up at 150 degrees. I actually broke out the winter front, 50-degree ambient temperature, and I had to put the winter front on it just to get it back up to that 170 range. So my question to you is that a pretty dire situation to maybe get in there and get some different thermostats in? Maybe they're stuck. I don't really know, but like I said, it's got 27,000 on an in-frame.
So I would verify the temperature gauge is correct with the heat gun first. And if it is indeed correct, more than likely the thermostats aren't closing the whole way. And of course, the engine is just not going to run efficient at that low of a water temperature. So it would need fixed sooner than later, and that doesn't mean pull over instantly and get it done. But within a week or so, again, it's going to hurt fuel mileage and the performance of the engine if you don't get it fixed. But I'd verify the gauge is correct, because if the gauge is off and you throw a winter front on it, it might be running too hot then. Well, handheld heat guns I think most guys should have those in their toolbox in their truck. They're just really handy for any situation like this.
That's a good point. I mean, I guess I was just going to say, well, the fan ain't kicking on, but the fan's going to be going off of that same gauge, right? So,
no, not necessarily, and that's a good sign that the fan isn't running. The fan would have a different sensor. So that's a good sign that it's probably correct, and it's simply running cold. But I always like to verify stuff.
Yeah, good point. Yep, I could definitely do that. I could probably scrounge up an infrared gun at some point. Okay.
Hey, also,
good.
Don't forget there's a seal. The thermostat sits in a seal. And you remember how touchy that was, Pete, on some engines to get that seal just in the correct way?
Mm-hmm.
I've been in shops and I watch guys take a spray can and they put that down on the seal and they're beating on the top of a spray can to get that seal into place, other than having the correct tool and an arbor press to put that together. So,
okay, all right. Yeah, that was kind of my thought. I imagine it's doing me no favors in the economy realm, and it's probably not necessarily the best for it either. So that's kind of my next project here. I didn't really know whether this tank as well. It's just what it is. The wintertime. I mean, I'd have 170 degrees at 10 degrees ambient temperature, and even looks like last night it really kind of drove it home because driving straight in that wind plus the rain must have just been super cool in that radiator and all. And I was lucky to get 150 out of it. So that was the coldest I've seen it since I started running this truck.
that's hard on the liners too. So
Yeah. So that's why I busted out that winter front. At least got the temperature up a ways. So okay. I think that'll about do it. Again, thanks Pete for getting me steered the right path, getting this OPS installed, and pass it along to Brian in there as well.
I will do that.
All right. Thanks for the call. Let's try Texas again. Greg, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Kevin, for taking my call. Sorry about that. I believe you tried to get me on a few minutes ago, and I had a call I had to take on the other line.
Oh, that's okay. We got you.
So, the reason I was calling, I have a kind of a show idea for Pittsburgh Power, and also some suggestions. You know, sometimes y'all speak in terms that maybe not everybody understands, and you know, I've been trucking for a while. I understand a good part of it, but you know, things like, you know, Bruce, the things that you kind of promote as far as driving, you know, especially how to drive with your pyrometer and boost gauge. Maybe if you had a show that kind of, in layman terms, explains everything that that y'all are meaning, rather than just saying, you know, learn how to, kind of give some really good pointers.
You know, one of the things I like that, because we do run into this, and that you forget that some of these terms, you know, a lot of times we'll get a message from somebody and say, what do you mean? I keep hearing you mention setting the overhead, or, you know, we have 10 different terms for people that use different terms to talk about, you know, valve adjustment and all that. And they get confused. So, and then the one that was a big one for a while, because we were saying it all the time when we would say the word glider. People were like, what's a glider? They didn't know what we were talking about. And, you know, so many other things. So I like that. Now, one of the technologies that we're working on for our own app and our own shows is we're working on technology that would actually find all of those places in the audio. You know, you can search text. You can't really search audio. Well, you can now. There's some new technology we're looking at that would allow us to start building a library of these kinds of things so that we don't have to say them every time. And we can let somebody know, hey, if you want to understand more about oil samples, you just go here in our app, and every time we mention the word oil sample, it gets tagged and cataloged, and you can just go listen to those calls. So that's one of the things.
That would be neat.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure we can pull this off. The programmers tell me they can, but it gets even better than that. I mean, they're thinking we might get this down to the point where the speech recognition software now is getting really powerful. So we might even be able to do things like I said oil sample, then I said ISX, and it will actually tag all of those things, and then you could sort by I want to hear all the oil sample calls when it was an ISX. And so it's pretty exciting if we pull this off. Like I said, and this is one of the reasons we're building our own stuff. There's some new technology out there, and we want to do some things with shows to make those kind of things possible.
Oh yeah, I think that's what makes it great. Is as far as I know, it stinks. It wasn't good at first getting off of Sirius, but I truly think it's going to be better. Especially for the listeners to be able to do stuff like that. I love the fact that I was able to listen to every show since you got off Sirius just by going to Let's Truck and get caught up on everything.
Yeah, now you'll be able to binge listen, which is kind of cool sometimes.
Yes, it is.
Tell your friends, because there's a lot of people that think we're not doing this. We get 4 or 5 calls a day from owner-operators that think that we're totally gone, and we're not. So
yeah,
tell your friends,
exactly.
Yeah,
I talk about that in the magazine articles, but people aren't reading magazine articles like they used to. So we define everything like EGT. What is EGT? It's exhaust gas temperature. So when we write it in the magazine article, if we say EGT, then we'll put parentheses, say exhaust gas temperature. So, and some people say, well, I have a manifold pressure gauge. I don't have a boost gauge. Well, manifold pressure is the same thing.
Yep, exactly. Y'all were talking earlier about, do it yourself. And I think it was last week, the week before, we kind of touched on that as well. And, you're right, though. Not only, it's not just the money savings, but the time savings, especially, with the wait that you have with some of these shops because they're so backed up. And as far as money, I mean, I save myself a few $100s each time just by doing my own oil changes. Now, granted, I don't change my oil a lot because I have the OPS. But, it's still, and then, for those who don't have the OPS and you're changing it more often, it's not that difficult. And a lot of people don't know it, but Walmart takes your old oil. So that's what I do. I buy my oil from Walmart and I bring them my old oil, and they take it, and it's not that difficult.
No, that's we haven't talked much about that for the last several years because rates were so good. There was so much freight. I really think it made sense to just get out and run hard. Do what you're good at. Drive the truck. Make as much money as you can. If you were doing your own maintenance during that time, it's even better, but it wasn't something we were pushing a lot. Based on everything I'm hearing about our economy, our industry, what we're heading for, I think for some people it might make the difference between them staying in business or not.
Yeah.
And also, whenever
the cost of things these days.
And when we start, we're going to start filming the shows more from our location, and we're going to take apart. And it might be a part of a turbo, it might be a fuel injector, but it'll be something, and we're going to explain that, and you'll be able to see it.
I love that.
And we're going to talk about things like that.
I love that.
Let me say this. Good friend of mine, Robbie Smith, just had to pull a brake drum off of his Pete, and I just happened to see it on Facebook this morning. And Robbie and his son are very mechanically inclined. They're in North Carolina, and while he was pulling the brake drum off, he noticed he had a broken U-bolt on the spring. Look what could have happened if that spring would have come apart and come out from under that truck.
Yep.
He caught it because he was going in to do something to the brakes.
Hey, Bruce.
That's why it pays to get under that truck.
Bruce, I love it too. We'll work with you on this to come up with a fairly portable setup for video and do a show on how an overhead gets done and actually show it. Remember at the CMC, Jeff Zarley built that trailer. That was his, we had everybody set up doing different things. Jeff was there with an engine on a trailer doing an overhead. You couldn't get near that trailer. There were people on top of each other trying to watch that. They were so interested in that.
That's right. Well, we can do that. We can we can do everything. We had made several videos, and we have them on our site. We even have the video on how to put a Safety Plus on. We have videos on timing big cams and videos on turbochargers and a lot of different videos. You just have to take the time to go to PittsburghPower.com and look at them. And while you're on there, look at the testimonials that people, that owner-operators have set in on the max mileage catalyst. I mean, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm running my first tank with a max mileage in my big truck, and I've already put it in the pickup, and I've got a diesel Kubota side by side that I've put it in yesterday, and I think I know you put it in the motorcycles and all, so I guess it would be even a good idea in my my Polaris gas powered side by sides as well, right?
That's right, 1 cc per gallon. Where have you been for 3 years? You're just getting started.
Man, about 3 years ago, I finally quit Sirius. I was one of the first to get the unlimited or the lifetime subscription, and then they stuck it to me on that and didn't continue. And I had been paying, and I was just aggravated and canceled them. And so, and it's funny, I told Kevin this whenever I first called a few weeks ago. The day that I restarted my subscription was the day that they canceled him.
It's funny. I was about to say, well, maybe we'll both remember that day. I've already forgotten it. I have no idea what day it happened.
I just know it was. I believe it was a Friday because it was. I could tell it was a repeat show on Friday, and then so I called in Monday. And whatever they said, I said, "This is not trucking business." No,
I do remember it actually was a Thursday that it happened, and then Friday I was off the air, and then Monday I was totally off the air. But the reason I remember it happened on Friday after the show, or Thursday after the show, I took Friday off, and we actually went live that Saturday. We didn't even wait till Monday. I said, you know what? We're not waiting for Monday. We're just going to go back on the air right away. We went back on Saturday. We've been on ever since.
You can't keep a good man down.
I believe that was would have been I believe the end of February, because the first show was like February 28th or something.
That sounds about right. So, and then that was about the time that I hit the road. So yeah, I was on the road just about 2 months. So. Yeah, and Bruce, to let you know, we're only doing what we consider a soft launch on the show. We did not promote it heavy at all. We didn't send anything out to anybody except the two tribes. While we're working through our technology and our apps and getting you guys up and ready to do your own shows, we're really keeping the audience pretty limited. Once the app rolls out and all the hosts are ready to do their own shows, then we'll really start pushing this hard. Because we know there are a lot of people out there that don't know where we are yet, but that's okay. We've got the tribes here, and the shows are going good, and we're growing, and the technology gets better every day, so we're excited about it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be a beta tester. I talked to Angie this morning, and they're going to get me set up because I'm listening every day, so I might as well be able to offer my feedback.
There you go. We appreciate that. All right. Thanks for the call. Thanks for the support. We're going to grab another one. We're going to head off to Iowa this time. Paul, welcome to the program.
How's it going, gentlemen?
Good. What's on your mind today?
Well, first I'm going to start off with amen, Bruce, on all his CIA, FBI, DOJ stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Where's our legal system? With the biggest
Right,
theft that our country ever had, where's the legal system?
Yeah, exactly. They're failing us completely. The entire legal system failed us on this. But I'm calling up. I bought a 96 International. It's got an N14 in it. I was told it had 355 rear ends in it. I can't find a tag on these axles. But there's no way it's a 355. It was made with a 10-speed. Somebody eventually had put in a 13-speed. But I'm in 13th gear doing 1,600 RPMs, and I'm only at 60 miles per hour. So I got two questions. Yeah, right. I'm thinking it's got to be high fours, low fives, or something for the rear ends to be.
Well, hold on, because there's one thing we absolutely have to verify before you try to calculate the rear ends. Or I can give you a way to calculate the rear ends without knowing this. It's not quite as accurate, but it'll get us close. We can't calculate the rear end because we don't know what the final drive is in that transmission. It could be a direct drive, 13-speed final gear. Could be a single overdrive, or it could be a double.
You're right. You're right. It could be. I'm thinking it's overdrive just because as soon as I go into 12th and 13th, it doesn't have the full power.
Yeah,
so I'm thinking it is, but I can't guarantee it.
Right.
And I
right.
So you get the tag off the transmission. There's no tag on the damn transmission either.
So here's one way to get us close. You know, we might not be able to tell the difference between a 342 and a 355 or a 355 and a 370. We can get pretty darn close. You park the truck, put a mark on the tire pointing right down to the ground at the center of the tire, where it's touching the ground.
Okay.
Tie a string around your drive shaft. Now, have somebody move the truck slowly and count the number of times that string goes around on the drive shaft. If you have 355s, it should go around 3.5 times in the time it makes for that mark to get back down to the bottom.
Oh, all right.
And that'll get us close. If it turns, almost 4 times, then it could be a 390. If it goes a little past 4, it could be a 410. But you can get pretty darn close using that method.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I will definitely do that. My other question is, because I'm going to fix this. I actually bought the truck, guys. Yeah, they put a lot of money into it. It's a good truck. Man, I got it. This thing's so rusted. The oil pan was so rusted, it had seep holes all over it. And same with the coolant reservoir and the shift linkage for going back to the transmission for shifting. You could almost pop the ball joints out with your thumb. I was like, man, what the hell? But anyways, I got it pretty much all up and going now. So what RPM should an N14 Select, it's not the Select Plus, just straight Select, what RPM should this be running at?
On the level, you should be around 1,500 or so on the level. 14 to 15 on the hills when you're working 16, 17, and 1,800.
Okay.
How many pounds does it make? What's your turbo boost on the pole?
There's not a turbo boost on it. I will have one on it soon. I bought this as a spare second truck, so I'm putting it through the pace now. This is only the 3rd time it's been on the road, and it's all been short local stuff. But I'll be getting a pyrometer and boost gauge up on the A-pillar here so I can see them.
Just to give you an example of what I was talking about earlier, Matt ran it through the calculator for me. This is how critical that final transmission ratio can be to this calculation. Because when you were talking about 1,600 at 60 miles an hour, you think, oh, boy, that's got to be really low gears. But here's the actual calculation. If you had a single overdrive 13-speed, which it's very possible, at 0.86 with 355s, you're dead on 1,600 at 61 miles an hour. So it may not be really low gears. It may just be a single overdrive transmission. That's why we have to verify one of the numbers, then we could calculate the other one. We either have to verify what the rear end gear, or we have to verify what the final transmission gear is, then we'd be able to calculate the other one. But that's it could easily be something like 355s.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Which would also mean
which
would also mean if it were a direct drive, it could be like 264s or 273s.
I actually did put 260. Well, I was going to put 264s in my other truck. I wasn't informed that it was a 262 until after I went to pay for it. They didn't have 264. But boy, would that make a difference running 75 miles per hour out past you going to Oregon.
Yeah, well, that's how
out from Wisconsin.
You know, we talk a lot about the fact that all of those factors play into that. Even when you're getting right down to it, tire size plays into that calculation as well. Basically, our tire size is another gear. And you can change that gear by putting a different size tire on it. You're basically putting a different size gear into the driveline. Let's go to Oklahoma, and I'll let you know this is the last call we have on the line. If you want to jump in with more maintenance-related calls, I would do it now. Once we get through all the calls here on this show, we'll take a break. I'll be coming back at 12:30 Eastern time for the pit. I am going to have open phone lines throughout the entire time. If you want to talk to me, you certainly can. If you have questions about politics or how they are affecting trucking, you can ask. If you have an opinion about politics, a lot of people do, call in and join me. Let's go to Oklahoma. Gene,
Kevin,
welcome.
can I call in on this same line?
You
can I call in on this same line?
You can. If you want to talk politics, we can talk politics. That'll be fun.
Oh, I love to talk politics right now.
I might call back to listen to Bruce talk about politics.
Yeah, there you go. Gene in Oklahoma, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Hey, I have a 2001 Volvo with a Detroit Series 60 12.7. I bought it a few months ago. I've been working it out. I bought Pittsburgh Power. I got the manifold, the turbo, the muffler. I got a fleet air filter. It ran fine for a few weeks, and then I've started getting, I'm calling it a burping at this point, because it'll cut out almost like the Jake brake's trying to engage, but it doesn't. It's only at a lower RPM. I actually sent a copy of the video over to Pete, and then I talked to Brian about it. I had found the wire on the starter solenoid that was crossed over to the other post. I separated that. I thought it had fixed it, but it did not. It just minimized. It doesn't do it as often now. I'm not sure what's going on with it. We have put 6 new injectors into it. It's not the injector. And I say whenever it burps, it's whenever I'm decelerating down a hill, like even if I'm going to a traffic light in between, it's more at lower RPM. Whenever I go to ease back into the throttle, you can feel it's not making the power. It's almost like something's holding you back. And it will cough. Generally, it blows a white or a gray smoke out. A few days ago, it did put a heavy puff of black smoke that almost sounded like a 12 gauge going off. My other truck was behind me, and he actually had some debris hitting the windshield after it did it. I don't know if there's a program in the computer that might be messed up or in wiring, but I'm thinking somewhere along that line. I'm just trying to eliminate stuff out of the equation, but it's still carrying on. At highway speeds down the road, I just went from Pittsburgh to Las Vegas. I'm on my way back, and it runs fine on the open road. It's just at the lower RPMs when you're trying to put a load under it at lower speeds.
Could be air. You might want to check with a sight glass to see if you're getting air into the fuel system. And Pete, Leroy, do you guys have any thoughts?
Well, I checked the fuel system out completely, fuel pressure, fuel restriction, especially when the truck does it, and see if it affects anything. If nothing changes with that, then we can at least roll the fuel system out and look elsewhere. A
I
test
did
ECM
notice
might be a
that-
quick change.
I did notice the other day on my Davco, the fuel was up about 2 inches. And when I lifted the hood in Vegas, I see my fuel on the Davco was down about a half inch from the bottom. And I thought, that was odd after it started climbing. Very rarely have I ever seen that fuel level fall back after it climbed up the Davco.
Okay. If you're looking in tanks to see if there's anything, when the tanks are low, see if you get any algae or asphaltene going on.
I haven't seen anything in there, but the one thing I do notice is it draws predominantly from the passenger side tank rather than the driver's tank. If I'm going to put 100 gallons in, 25 gallon will go in the driver's side and 75 in the passenger side.
So that could be a couple of things: drawing from one tank more than the other. It could be returning to one tank more than the other, or an issue at the vent. It's a 99 truck, or 2002. Have you changed the fuel lines on it yet?
I have not yet. No.
Yeah, and that would be something to do as a maintenance, which might take care of this problem. New suction lines as well as return lines, simply because of the age.
Right. I say it doesn't bother me when I'm on the road, but when I'm at the lower RPMs, it makes me wonder if I'm going to make it to the next traffic light sometimes.
So when does it?
Pete,
Oh, go ahead.
Pete, did you see the video that I emailed to you there a few weeks ago?
No, I wasn't able to open it.
Okay, yeah, 'cause that's. I know I forwarded that over to Brian, and he was able to open it up there. But you can see I was able to capture it in the passenger side mirror where it just put a big plume of smoke out. Sometimes it'll backfire. Sometimes you would think I have a gas engine with a bad plug into it. It's not hitting on all cylinders. It'll backfire.
Can you make it? I mean, is it something that you can make do on a regular basis? Is it completely random?
It used to be at random. More often now, I can make it do it any time.
When does it do it again? You say like when you're going down, you go off of a downhill, then you get back into the throttle. Is that when it does it, or what?
Yeah,
what makes
at a
it do
lower
it?
speed. If I'm down 30 to 40 mile an hour, and I'm going down I go down a little bit of a downcline, and whenever it's just idling, free rolling, when I get to roll back into the throttle, you'll feel it start to pick up, and then you can just feel in the seat you're losing forward drive, and that's whenever it's getting ready to pop, crack, and it'll put a big plume of smoke out the stack.
Well, you said idle, but do you mean idle, or do you mean like if it's in gear, it's just no throttle?
It's in gear. It's in gear. It's just rolling down, just freewheeling.
And did you say you did injectors, or you're thinking about it?
There's 6 new injectors in it.
Okay. And does it do it any other time when you start to roll into the throttle, or no?
Not really. I didn't notice it doing it bobtail, except for the last time I kind of thought it was doing it, but I didn't have a load onto it. But if I even hook up to an empty trailer, once I'm putting more of a load onto it, it's more predominant.
And you don't know if it has a program or not, right?
I do not.
Okay.
The truck's got 1,284,000 on it right now. I don't think it's ever been broke into. Well, no, it has. It was rebuilt. I'm sorry, about 300,000 ago before I bought it.
Yeah.
It's actually going about 10,000 miles between on a gallon of oil, so everything's tight in the rings, and the oil samples have come back great on it.
Mm-hmm. And when you roll back into it at a low RPM, does the engine hesitate, or like there's no acceleration really?
It will start to pick up, and then you can almost feel like you're running the Jake brake, or you're not getting all of the power coming into it when it does it. And
right.
It will flutter a little bit, and I'm now calling it when it burps, because that's what it does. That's when it rolls.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's been a grayish blue, white colored smoke. I have noticed a couple times now when it's just been a huge black ball come out of the exhaust.
Are you running the maximum? No, I'm sorry. Are you running the catalyst?
Yes. I'm actually the dealer for you up there. I'm up in Dayton.
Oh, okay.
It sounds like it's happening while the engine is going into smoke control mode, because you can feel the lack of power. You say it's while the power is coming on, and I ask about the program, because if it's stock, it can still have an issue depending on if the ECM was ever swapped, or if they put a file that didn't belong in there, or something from the dealer. Because older files ran like a different smoke control strategy, I guess, in layman's terms. Basically, the old ones ran a lot more timing, and the new ones don't. And it sounds like you're either like loading up on fuel, which I thought maybe it was like an injector dripping down, and then when you're under acceleration, you get a bunch of fuel in the cylinder, and then when you get back on the throttle, then it's abnormal combustion. Right. But you said you put new injectors in it, so that rules that out. But it still sounds like there's something going on in smoke mode.
Yeah, we did run a new harness when we put the injectors in, new wiring harness down to the ECM. And one other thing to take note of, before we did that, I only had one stage of the Jakes. It only had a high and low for stages on the Jakes. And whenever my mechanic put the wiring harness in, he just tied the two solenoids together, so I've only got high engine brake status now. And whenever I run that, I get an engine code. Whenever I'm on the Jake, it'll throw an engine code, which I believe is 51-3.
Not sure if there's top of my head.
Yeah, it's. I talked to YouTube, told me it was something to do with the engine brake, and if I turn the engine brake on, when it comes up, when I turn the engine brake off, it goes away. So it's something tied to that. He said it was getting no power to that second stage on the engine brake assembly.
Have you taken your lid off ECM or no?
Say again?
I was going to say, has anyone taken the lid off the ECM to see if there's water and stuff in it? That's pretty common for the Jakes to go out if they got water in them.
No, they have not.
Yeah.
Matter of fact,
might be something worth doing.
Somebody to work on the Detroit, I couldn't find anybody that had an opening to get in. But my mechanics worked on one or two before, so we got into it that way.
You'll have that.
So did you say you were in Dayton, PA?
Yes, that's where I'm based out of.
Okay, well, heck, you're only an hour and 15 minutes from us, right?
Yeah, well, about 45 minutes. I've actually been down. I was testing that one other product for you, if you remember, Bruce.
Right. No, I remember. As soon as you said Dayton, I knew who you were. So why don't you just bring it on down and let Leroy and Kai look at it and do a program?
Bruce. The shop's full. I mean, these guys are really backed up.
Is it full for engineering too?
Yeah, you're backed up, right, Leroy? I mean, at the moment he is. I mean, that can change.
Yeah, at the moment.
The shop's really full right now.
Right. And that's what I've understood that. Trying to work around it, that's what I've been trying to diagnose it myself, just rule different items out rather than, I've checked the wiring out, and the only thing I found was that one lead wire coming off the solenoid down off the starter it's like an 8-gauge wire maybe. It had rubbed against one of the wires that come off the post beside it, and whenever I took that out and I put new tape on those wires, I made it from the house. I was at the Youngstown, and the whole way at 422 or anything, it never acted up, which I expected it to, especially coming down like Route 85 there on the 2-lane. That's but it was blowing it very heavy when I was on those slower 2-lane roads. It would come up quite often.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like we just need to get it looked at some time. Not quite sure when, but that's something I think we have to look at in person.
If we have an extra loaner ECM, throw a loaner ECM on and see if it goes away would be quick.
Yeah, that would eliminate one piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, you said there's a cover on the ECM I could pull off to see if it's waterlogged or anything, or...
Yeah, so there's 4 screws on it. If you pop the ECM off, there's 4 little screws in the back. You take the 4 little screws out. And if it's an old ECM, they have a separate circuit board on the edge, not just on the bottom. And the edge circuit board, as I'll call it, is right along the seal of the ECM. And that when that seal gets contaminated or it gets, whatever, and fuel breaks down and it lets water in. And water always lands right there because that's where the drivers are for the Jake brakes. So I feel like it's sort of a common issue when you hear Jake brakes go bad on an older 60 series, that it's usually water got in and destroyed that part of the board.
Right. And I have a background in electronics, and I have a understanding.
Yeah, so you know what I mean. Yeah, so if you pop it off and you see green and stuff, then, that's what it could be. Not saying that's what it is, but I've seen that a bunch.
Right. Okay, well, something I can get and check into. I deliver in Coraopolis on Friday morning, so.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Sounds like we've got a plan. We've got some more calls on the line, so we're going to keep going. We're going to head off to Kansas this time. Bob, welcome to the program.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
We can. What's on your mind today?
Hello? Oh, I couldn't describe my problem with my 12.7 any more than exactly what the last guy was talking about. And I have done the test that I put a sight glass through my fuel line to check for air, and I've replaced my injectors. I replaced the wiring harness from the engine, the harness for the engine harness, and my cab harness. I've replaced those two, and we cannot track it down. But it is exactly what the last guy was talking about. Every time you coast down a hill and you go to roll back into the throttle, squeeze back into the throttle, not every time, but a lot of times, it just seems like I'll get this same backfire or this loading up with fuel. It's just, and like he said, you get this whitish smoke coming out, and it's only when you start to squeeze into the throttle. If I stomp onto the throttle, it won't do it. But if I go to just kind of pick up slacken my drive line just a little bit, nice and easy after coasting down a hill, that's when it starts to load up real heavy with fuel, and just boom, just a huge backfire will happen, and then you get the black smoke out of the stacks. And I was just listening to the show, and I could not describe my 12.7 any more than exactly what he's having problems with.
Here's what I want you to do. I want you to call our office, ask for Leroy, and give him your name and phone number, because the other fellow's local. When we get his fixed, we'll call you and tell you what we have to do to fix yours.
Okay, I will do it.
Okay?
I bought lots of products from you guys, so I'm sure.
All right, appreciate it.
All right.
It really does sound like because when you're going downhill and you're not in the throttle, then the engine's not fueling, right? There's no fuel being injected. And then when you get back on it, there's not a whole lot of fuel. So for there to be a backfire or, some sort of combustion event, there has to be fuel getting in there or something combustible. So
that's when you start to step back onto the throttle. If you let your foot completely off the throttle, it'll go away. It'll almost cycle it out if you stay off the throttle long enough. But it's when you just start to step into the throttle just ever so slightly, that's when it seems like it starts fueling too much. Like it's not reading how much boost pressure, and the throttle thinks it has boost pressure, and so it's starting to feed a lot of fuel or flood the cylinders full of fuel.
Well, how much boost do you have while jaking?
Well, zero. I'm not while jaking. It doesn't happen while you're jaking. It happens when you're starting to just crack your throttle open. That's when the problem starts to happen. That's when I start to see smoke, is when you're on the throttle. If you're completely off the throttle, it'll make the problem go away. Because if you start to hear it and it starts to smoke a little bit, and it starts to do that little stumble or the cough that other guy was talking about, you let off of it and just let it keep coasting for a while, and it'll kind of clear itself out. And then you go ahead and get back on the throttle hard, and then it'll go ahead and run fine. But it's when you're just easing back, like you just coasting down a hill coming into a town, and you start to pick up your throttle just a little bit, that's when she'll really load up on you.
Yeah, like you said, like what you said, they're loading up. It's kind of what it sounds like. But I'd like to see that one in person. That would be interesting to see. So,
have you ever like on an old carburetor car, and you're and it's a stick shift, and you're going down the street and you shut the ignition off, and then you turn it back on, and it'll make a backfire. That's exactly what it does. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, and when you're saying about it, yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, well, I just wanted to throw that in. That guy has the exact problem. So if you figure his out, yeah, please let me know.
All right.
I have thrown everything I could possibly throw at this truck to figure it out.
All right.
And it's really intermittent, and it seems like it's like I almost feel like it's about altitude or a drastic change in altitude. And is there an altimeter in these things that knows like the altitude?
Yes, there is. It's not very precise, I guess so. But there is one.
It seems to happen sometimes when I'm climbing a hill, and I'll go to shift gears, like to downshift the hill. I'm working it real hard, and then I'm like coming up to a stop sign, and I need to downshift a couple of gears. It'll catch me like that. Sometimes it'll stumble as I'm going after I've downshifted one gear, and I go to step back on my throttle, and I'm doing it real easy again. It'll do that backfire again, just like that. So I'll let you guys go.
Yeah.
I appreciate the show.
All right. Thanks for the call. We're gonna wrap this up. Bruce, Pete, Leroy, anybody want to finish with anything?
I just want to thank you for giving us an extra 22 minutes. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're, really the way we're kind of running the show right now, since we're broadcasting to a limited audience right now, is we do at least an hour. I mean, we can fill an hour just us talking if we wanted to. That's not hard. Once the calls start coming in, I try to stay till the calls are done. And that's the nice thing about not having a hard stop time. I can stop whenever I want now. So if calls are coming in, we just keep taking them. We figure if people have questions, we can help them. And as the audience, as we start to grow it, once we release the app, then we'll probably go back to hard times. But I'd like to get the Power Hour back to 2 hours with no commercials, which is really almost closer to 3 hours. By the time you figure out how much of an interruption a commercial is, you start going into the commercial almost an hour before a minute before you have to take the break. Then when you come back, you got to do the intros again, and then you got to get back into the call, and you lose a lot of time with 4 of those, every hour. So not doing the breaks really makes it nice. I think we can stick with the call. We can stay on point. We don't get as distracted, and we can get a lot more calls in. So I'm going to wrap this up. I will be back in just about 7 minutes. We will go live at 12:30 Eastern Time with The Pit, Politics in Trucking. I want to thank the team from Pittsburgh Power, Bruce and Pete and Leroy, and we'll do it again next week. Be safe. Be profitable, be fit and healthy. Always do the hard work and master the journey.